episode 2 of Inside Our Centre podcast, hosted by me, Lachlan Rayner, with Little Athletics Victoria Chief Executive Officer, appearing as a regular on the show. We'll be bringing you monthly conversations with key people within the Little Athletics community and discussing topics related to everyday people who spend hours upon hours supporting their local sporting community. Whether you are a volunteer within Little Athletics yourself or just a keen and motivated individual that knows what it's like to be the first person there and the last person to leave, this is the podcast for you. And we return once again to the early mornings here at Athletics House, the Little Athletics Victoria offices. Joining me for episode 2, we've got 3 guests sitting around the round table. Just in front of me, we've got Tony Stubbs from South Melbourne. Just say hello as I introduce you.
Morning, Lachlan.
Bryce Sandow from Ringwood.
Good morning.
And also from Ringwood, Michael Smith.
Morning, everyone.
So thank you very much for joining me on the early hours this Sunday morning. We'll get straight into it. We'll introduce our guests before we get onto this topic of new committee members. So we've got, as mentioned, just off the top, Tony Stubbs there from South Melbourne Districts LAC, home venue for you here from where we're recording. Just briefly, you spent 4 years on the committee of South Melbourne. At the centre, 2.5 years of that being on the committee. You've held the vice president and president roles, and spent a fair bit of time with setting up new committees, setting up and documenting processes and procedures, and successfully obtaining a Coles grant of $5,000 for your centre. Bit of an overview there, Tony. Just talk us through briefly your experiences so far.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great. That I joined about 4 years ago at the club, and certainly it was a very inclusive club, and my son thoroughly enjoyed it, and the parent group was fantastic. And, my son was someone that competed in the relays and the multis and all those type of events, so certainly put up my hand at those times to help out, whether it was on just the normal track day as a team manager, to help out and take some responsibility and got involved in that way. And then, very much that they were looking for a succession planning, and sort of got on the committee early on and sort of had an overview being vice president, and then that sort of transitioned into president where I'm sitting today.
And have you held, you ran through what you've done here at Little Athletics, have you held committee positions or volunteer positions in other sports?
I've been involved in Auskick, on the committee there, and headed up overseeing the women's side of things, which was fantastic for a couple of years, and that was a lot of fun. So that gave me some background and knowledge, I suppose, on what's involved and how it works, and obviously the time and effort that you need to commit, because certainly it's not something that you just fly in on the weekend and fly out, but there's a bit of planning involved, and that I love it, that my kids love what they do, and I suppose that makes it a lot easier for me once they start to step away. I suppose then for me it's about trying to give myself time back. So while they're in the thick of it and enjoy it, and loving what I do.
Cool, and we'll move around the table to Bryce Sandow from Ringwood Little Athletics Centre. You've spent 8 years at the centre, 6 of those on the committee, 3 years as president, 2 as track and field manager, 1 year communications, and I think there's a bit of a double up there, but 4 years as special events subcommittee. Returned to a new track in the 2017-18 season, so quite a common hurdle that a lot of centres do have to get through, so look forward to talking to you about that one. New pavilion at the same time, so 2 times top centre, Royal Children's Hospital appeal, and a couple of EMR top centre awards. So have been there for a little while, have seen quite a bit of change going on at your centre, and also some successful, achievements there as well. So welcome, Bryce.
Thank you, Lachlan. Yeah, it's great to be involved, and it's fair to say I'm probably on the tail end of my journey with Little Athletics as my children sort of transition out. But 8 years at the centre, and got sort of involved pretty early on, and sort of onto the committee sort of 2 years in or so, when I took on newsletter and website, and I was just initially sort of going along just to make sure I had my finger on the pulse in terms of, doing that role. And then over time, just transitioned into different roles. Went into the track and field coordinator, or I guess competition director, as it's sometimes called. So that management role. And then transitioned into president. So it's been interesting. 3 years. I've had 3 separate secretaries, which has made things a challenge at times. But yeah, look, we've done some amazing things in that time as well. We had a complete rebuild of our track, plus a new pavilion put in, which meant that we moved out of our old pavilion. Nothing like dragging through 40 years of our documentation that was all stored down in the old building, but it was a great time for us. The new track's always nice, but yeah, the pavilion was great, but came with some real headaches dealing with council, Sport Rec Victoria, a few of those bodies that get involved when you do that. But Ringwood's also a fairly proud club, and always feature sort of in the top centres around EMR. We've managed to pick up that gong. Not under my tenure, but a few years we picked up Centre of the Year for across the state, which was a good outcome. It's something that we always strive to at the centre. And the Royal Children's Hospital appeal thing is something that we get right behind every year, and we really push that. We've had a couple of athletes who've made use of the Royal Children's Hospital, as no doubt all centres do, so it touches close to home, so it's a great initiative. So that's my time at Ringwood. It's been wonderful so far, and looking forward to handing over to Mike and transitioning away from the committee role.
And that transitions us perfectly into our third and final guest, Michael Smith, also from Ringwood, taking over as president for this upcoming season. So this is your first year on the committee, so jump straight into the top role.
Yes, so thanks for having us here, Lachlan. And I thought, what better way than to get involved by jumping into the presidency and just swim. Yeah, that's it. swim, and obviously try and build on the really strong foundation that Bryce and previous presidents at Ringwood have done at the centre. I've seen that centre from a distance grow and evolve from my time many years ago in Little Athletics and then into seniors and whatnot, and been a number of years since I had anything to do with athletics. My nephews are at Ringwood now, and I thought great opportunity to get back involved, get back into the community, and help this centre continue to grow and evolve with, I guess, from a different perspective. I don't have children at the club. I don't have children full stop. So I'm coming in with, I guess, fresh eyes, which I guess if you're trying to continue to move forward is not such a bad thing.
So what made you do it? What made you? Have you been on committees previously?
Not committees per se. I've lost track of the amount of events I've volunteered at. I think the Little Athletics gave me so much joy as a kid growing up from the age of 5 right through until I was 12 years old before I moved into senior aths, and that just doesn't happen without volunteers. And I guess the president is at the top, and nothing sort of works the way it should if there's not someone there controlling and directing from the top down. That goes in all different sort of aspects, and I've seen that happen at other clubs, events that I've been involved in other areas where there hasn't been a president from the start of a season, and there's just a lack of direction. So while I can't be involved as a parent because I'm not one, I thought, well, it's a good way to get involved. I've got a real love affair for athletics and running in general. I'm still quite active in the running industry or culture. Very different type of running that I do these days. So I thought I'll just get in there and help out board. My brother's very heavily involved with Ringwood as well, and my nephews are there. So,
well, thank you, and that's a good introduction to our 3 guests that are going to be joining us on this podcast. So, as mentioned off the top, today our main topic is new committee members. So we're going to be talking about not only, I guess, our 3 guests' experiences as joining a committee for the first time and how they felt, but we've got a couple of presidents here that have seen a number of different people come into a new committee position and how they sort of facilitate that to get the best out of them. And in turn get the best out of the club. So we will start to talk, and feel free, guys, to jump in whenever you feel that you can offer something to it. But we will start with you, Tony, at South Melbourne. So can you just briefly explain, and you have mentioned this in your introduction, your experience in joining the South Melbourne Districts Committee? Do you remember what it was like? Does anything stand out?
The guys that were on the committee had been around for a long period of time, and I suppose they hadn't had much of an idea of, as in looking at who was coming up next. So we had people who sort of all left at the same time, which was challenging. And it's no criticism of the previous committee because everyone does it differently and everything like that. So, you know, my previous president and secretary, they worked very closely. They'd been together for 5-6 years. So they were like husband and wife to an extent. And they did a lot of the things and did it very well. And probably the challenge for me was that you only know what you know when you take over, and when it comes to it, that you find out things along the way, and that, like anything, that, you know, I suppose one of my strengths is sort of being quite organised and documenting, having processes in place. And so one of the things that I've tried to do to make it easier for new people is we've started to document things and have them in shared drives so that when people need something, we can direct them. And you know, I might be jumping ahead, but just as far as we've cleaned out our committee again, or added 4 or 5 people this year, and people get scared when they hear the word committee because it's a commitment, and people say, I can't make Tuesday night meetings and things like that. And it's not really about the meetings; it's just about someone owning a specific role. And what does that role look like? So this year we've tried to do things a little bit differently by the ones who were there last year, and basically we had a whole 8 new people. We've started to document a couple of bullet points, a basic job description. So if someone's wanting to know what does that role entail, this is what's involved. You know, sharing jobs around. This is roughly how much time you might have to commit to each week, each month, so to speak. So they've got a general idea, because people go, I've never done that before. Well, you don't need to be an expert into how to set up the track, or, you know, how to do our communications, for example. You don't need to be a communications specialist, but, you know, everyone posts something on Facebook or Instagram, so it's not that hard. So it's probably to try and take away the myth that it's a challenging role and that there's a lot involved, and you can make out of it what you want. And I think that last year I was probably more hands-on. We struggled because we lost people very early on. So I think before the season started, we lost 4 people out of the committee who committed to do things. And then we had someone who was sick, unfortunately, and wasn't able to contribute for the majority of the year. So all of a sudden, I was doing like 4 or 5 roles. And this year, we've sort of added a few more people and hoping to be able to step back and just let people do their things. That we're not all going to be the same, so you can't expect the same outcomes, that there's not going to be 10 of me. And you need to trust the people that are putting up their hands, I think, because they're committed. They're there at the club, obviously supporting their kids, and you know, you just want more people involved to make it easy. Many hands make light work in that respect. But it's been great, and I've loved it. The parent group is fantastic, and I think it's easy to find out who those individuals are as well, because they're the same people who are carrying a basket on the Sunday or the Saturday, you know, taking the under-10s around to each of their activities, etc., donning the fluoro vest, or if it's a relay competition, they're happy to take the kids around to the call room and things like that. So you see the ones who are committed. So when you put the call out, you don't get many people putting up their hands. I've found it's more that if you went and tapped someone on the shoulder, that they're willing to. They're just wanting someone to come and drag them into the vortex, so to speak. And once you get them in, don't let them go.
Yeah. So you mentioned there that you have documented quite a bit of, I guess, the processes that community members go through when they all have access to a shared drive. Can you talk us through your experience with other members joining the committee? How have you seen them transition into the role? Have you noticed anything in particular?
was more so this year that we've started to get more members in and giving them more responsibility. So we're sort of going through that planning phase now for this season. We're going to face a few challenges because we're going to lose Lakeside for the majority of the year with the track resurfacing. So that's going to cause us a bit of angst and I think a little bit of extra work as well as to how to coordinate everything. More so it's just talking to people. I find that we're getting a new accountant and she was a little bit apprehensive and we said, listen, there's busy periods of the year, but otherwise it might be we just need you once a week, maybe for an hour, just to clear some invoices if they come through, and produce reports for us and everything like that. So it's often they want to be told what to do and given direction, and you just need to set that out for them. Whether it's being team manager for a relays or whatever it is, or overseeing a major comp, what's involved, and just making sure that everyone's working together. You've got the marquee, you've got the tub that's got the safety pins, the black marker pen, the spare bibs, whatever it may be. Just having everything organised and ready to go. And, there's 4 or 5 of us who were there last year who are back this year. And I think we're a lot more confident going into this season of what we need to do, what's required, and how to do it, and not be so probably stressed and being reactive. We can actually be proactive for a change.
And do you believe in any form of induction? Did you recall receiving one when you stepped onto the committee, or?
No induction. It was welcome on board. Sit down. There you go. There was no formal induction. So I think by just having these job descriptions and just fleshing out each of the roles is probably enough, I find, at the moment, because you don't want to make it too onerous, or you're giving people too many instructions and outlining what they need to do and not need to do, because all of a sudden it becomes restrictive, and the person might go, listen, I don't have time to be doing all of this. I'm willing to donate time, but let me do it my way to an extent. So I'm happy for people to evolve into the roles and make it their own as well. And hopefully, as we do this over a couple of years, that those PDs get fleshed out a little bit more and get a little bit more detailed, so that in 5 years' time, if someone's stepping into the president's role or sponsorship or whatever, there's a pretty solid platform for them to understand what's expected, and also having everything set up for them as to where things were previously, to look at sponsorship agreements, for example, or to look at how we did a particular event or did the timetable or something like that.
Cool, and we'll head on to our next centre here. So we've got Bryce and Michael, both from Ringwood. So can I get both of you just to talk through, probably only Bryce at the moment, your experience joining the Ringwood Centre? And sorry, how long ago was your AGM? When were you put on the... May. Okay, so you still haven't had too long.
On board for one committee meeting so far, which I sort of, even though I'm not on the committee, I attended for that session just to help transition, as we did a number of people who were transitioning out of roles. We had them come along just to help with that first meeting. But a similar story to South Melbourne. We didn't have a lot of documented processes and procedures coming onto the committee. I guess from my perspective, it was a little bit easier. As I said, I came on in the role of looking after the website and newsletter and the comms side of things. So really early on, it was just watch and observe from my perspective. I could sort of sit back and see what was going on around me, which took a lot of the pressure off me. I was comfortable with what I had to do. So I had that benefit of being able to learn, and I had 2 presidents in place prior to me that I was able to watch. Both had different styles as well, so it was interesting to watch how the centre changed a little bit with new people coming on board. But yeah, it gave me the opportunity to learn in the role effectively, which was quite good. Michael, on the other hand, has just stepped right in and straight into the president's role. So that's an interesting, slightly different approach to what I've taken. So
I guess, though, for me, having my brother very involved at the club and knowing what he puts in, and having gone to a number of meets, not just at the centre, but going to EMR, going to state, and obviously having been at Little Aths in my junior days, I've got a broad understanding. Obviously, Bryce and the other committee members have made it really quite easy to understand. And as Tony said earlier, it's not really a detailed thing to be on the committee or to volunteer. It's just helping. And as we said, like, many hands make very light work. A lot of people sit back because they think, oh, I can't do. Just you get involved. It's really easy to put a stake in a ground or in a sand pit, and that's all the clubs and the centres want from the parents and other people, just to make that much easier. And I've found that quite rewarding myself. I was sitting there one day and they went, "We need you to help." I'm like, "Okay, I can do that." And that sort of has transitioned into this process as well. There wasn't a big song and dance thing. Oh, you're the president, you've got to do. It was just like, just come to the committee meeting. You literally just run it and make sure that things are signed off and you're okay stuff. And it's as simple as that. I guess if I can be an example of not having children at a club to take on a role like this, hopefully that might encourage other people to do the same that are parents, because it's really just helping. It's nothing more than that at the end of the day. And the kids love seeing parents and uncles and aunties get involved, because then they're like, oh, it's not just me doing an event, it's me being part of a bigger community. Well, that's how I feel anyway.
Yeah, and I guess you know, we've had a lot of long-standing committee members. So you know, the treasurer through my tenure has been in place for 6 years. So we're lucky that we've also got a bit of continuity. We've got another committee member who I won't even guess how long she's been on the committee, but been involved with the centre for over 30 years. So has that knowledge of sort of everything that's happened. And as she often jokes, you know, we cycle through things. You know, no idea is a new idea, and so yeah, we over time we try different things. But yeah, the getting people involved, we did struggle a bit. We had a fairly well functioning committee because a number of people had been on the committee for quite a while. Someone once said to me, I think the reason why people don't put their hand up is because they feel like everything's running so well, and I guess it's like a duck on the water. You know, it looks like everything's calm on top, but underneath we're all scrambling to get stuff done each week. And I think it was only, interestingly, we went through a bit of a crisis period, and we had a secretary walk out of the role sort of mid-season, and so we had to sort of scramble to get someone in place, and we sort of got to the point of literally saying we can't function without a secretary, and we were putting the pleading out there to sort of say, well, we, you know, as an incorporated entity, we have to have a secretary, and it did reach almost a crisis point. And luckily since then we've had, because probably in the last 3 or 4 years we haven't really had anyone new come into the committee, and then last year we sort of brought a sort of 3 or so new people on board. And this year, luckily, we're seeing another 2 or 3 coming on board as well, which is a good thing as well, because a lot of us, our children are getting to the point where they're starting to transition away from little athletics. And obviously, we're not all going to be here forever. We've got a couple of committee members who don't have children at the centre. But yeah, obviously, your expectations of those people sort of diminish as you go on. And you need to bring the next lot of people through. So it's again, like Tony said, I mean, you have to go tap them on the shoulder. If you put it out there and just say, "Oh, we need help," everyone's busy as it is, and you also find, you know, quite often I'll find someone and that person will say, you know, "Oh, I'd love to get involved, but I'm already involved on this committee and this committee and this committee," and it tends to be those people who get involved in committees that you want to get on the committee.
They're the same people, aren't they?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so it's always a bit of a challenge, attracting those new people, but you just sort of have to keep chipping away at it. We've had a bit of success this year.
And Michael, you did mention before about there's no detailed role or description going into a new committee. Ideally, would there be one, or are you quite comfortable going in knowing that you I guess know what you're going to do and you want to put the framework around how you would run things?
A bit of both. I mean, you don't want to go in there with no description at all, but a more general one, just because a lot of people, as we mentioned a couple of times now, they hear the word committee and it's like, oh, hang on, I'm going to get well, it's not an international corporation. It's an athletic centre. And so it's a couple of hours once a month that you get together, and then during events and stuff you get more involved. And I guess whether it's the president, vice president, whatever the role may be, there should be some ownership on that person to do how they feel. But there's got to be some guidelines, obviously. There's some roles within a committee that are very important, secretary and treasurer, and they need to be there, and they've got to have, I guess, some things set in stone that need to happen on a regular basis just so that the centre continues to tick over the way it needs to be. But I think with, president really is an overseeing thing, and as important as it sounds, there's probably more important roles in the day-to-day running of a centre and clubs and whatnot. So I guess knowing that my main function is to chair the committee meeting and then to oversee things, but then from that make it my own role, and then whenever my time's up, explain what I've done as Bryce has done to me, and then give complete ownership to that next person. That's how I envisage my role to unveil, because if Bryce said this is just how I've done it and this is how you need to do it, I'm going to sit there and go, well, that restricts me because I'm a different person. And then it becomes a little bit more nerve-wracking, and it's harder then to try and get other people involved. And as Bryce mentioned and Tony's mentioned, you want to tap people on the shoulder of parents just to start small, helping out, volunteering at the events, and then hopefully then they feel comfortable enough to put their hand up if a committee role comes up.
And I think that talks a little bit to the change in approach we've taken this season. I think in the past we were targeting people to fill roles, whereas this year, and Mike's probably a bit contrary to this point, but I think we've focused more on just getting people involved in the committee. So just come and sit on the committee, just be a general committee member. No obligation. We might ask you to run the odd errand down to Officeworks to pick up supplies or something like that. We're not asking you to give up much more time than just coming along to the committee meeting. And we're kind of hoping that you start to build a group of people who can be involved, don't feel they're obligated to do a specific role, and we are trying to do role descriptions. We have sort of started sitting in my inbox. I haven't quite got to it, so we are trying to at least put some formality around it. But yeah, as Mike said, you don't want to sort of constrain it too much. But getting people involved more generally is kind of the new approach we've adopted, just to try and get people on board. Because as you say, it can be challenging to get them to commit some time when they're already busy people.
What's the makeup, and question for, I guess, all of you, what's the makeup of your current committee? How many people do you have on it? Question off the top of
15 or 16
Yeah,
now. There was a fair few at the committee meeting last week, but whether they're transitioning out, you'd be a better person to
I think
that. But it was fairly large.
Yeah, so it was a fairly big group. Obviously, the first meeting after the AGM, so people we'd sort of tapped on the shoulder at the AGM or prior, we sort of said, come along. Now, whether those people hang around or not, it's another question. There's a couple of people who've gone into roles, so the expectation will be they'll be there. But like I say, because we brought people in as general committee members, we've probably got 5-6 people who are just there as just a general committee, not doing an active role. Mind you, that first meeting we managed to hand out a few tasks to various people. So, but that's what you need. You need a group of people who can get stuff done. And Tony, you said it before, many hands make light work, and that's what we're trying to encourage. The more of us there are, the less each person has to do, and no one person's going to spend all of their waking hours outside of our other commitments that we have. Trying to run a centre on their own.
And Tony,
we've got about 8 or 9, and hoping to add maybe another 2 or 3, and that's just by trying to split the duties. I think that, I just upon reflection that you get all these new parents coming in under 9s or under 10s, and they just don't understand how the centre operates. Is that like your normal Sunday or Saturday meet? What's involved, and over time they sort of realise, God, these guys do a fantastic job. But I think, as you were saying before, is we will calm above the water, but below the water we're pedaling pretty quickly. And we haven't agreed upon this, but I think we're looking to do something a little bit differently this year as far as our registration day, because normally we'd hand out the packs at the meet, but we might try and do something where we might have an information session where you've got to come and pick up your pack, where we have the opportunity to get a large group of people in front of us and attentive for a small period of time to actually, I suppose, educate the new ones and also appeal to the existing ones that we do need your help on weekends to mark a jump, to sweep the runway, whatever it may be, etc. You know, happy for you to follow your child around, but don't just stand there and sit back. That it makes it easier for everyone to get in and out. You know, to pull the cover over the long jump pit or to heave a high jump bag, whatever it may be. That I think you were saying before, Lachlan, that we're there excuse me, an hour beforehand setting up or earlier, and we're there an hour afterwards, and it's always us, and it shouldn't have to be us all the time. So I think it's just trying to debunk a few myths that you don't have to have run before, for example, to be able to contribute. You don't have to have sat on a committee at all as well. It's just basically hands, a smile. Your kid gets a lot out seeing their mum or dad actually contributing. You know, that they're not just sitting back with their latte in the stand watching, but they're actually out there observing and contributing to encourage them and their fellow teammates in their respective age groups.
Yeah, my son once said to me, he goes, "Dad, it's great that you're the president." You know, I don't know what it was, but he did like it. He thought it was great that I was out there, and I'm not the sort of person that sits still anyway, so I was always going to get involved. But it does. It gives them a sense that my dad's helping out and he's part of this.
It is funny you say that. I remember being, I was at Killer Little Athletics myself, and can remember when my dad started to go onto the committee as team manager and then vice president and president, and I'd always be down there with him in the morning. I'd jump out of the car, unlock the gate, get back in the car, we'll drive down to the next gate, unlock the gate, and I'd go out and get the speakers. So it is, I do recall that. I sort of, from remembering my experiences as an athlete, it's almost like I was feeling like I was almost president as well in that sort of capacity when I was around my peers as athletes.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think as we get older, we tend to forget that that's what kids love doing as much as the actual athletic side of things. If they feel like they're involved and got a point of importance at such a young age, like just opening a gate or putting the hurdles out and helping out. So if there's more parents that are willing to be there early in the morning, the more kids that are probably going to get that enjoyment.
Yeah, it's better.
Just doing a setup rather than doing like my youngest nephew, he's here nor there about the athletic side of things, but if he gets to sort of feel important and have a role, he's going to get much more enjoyment out of the rest of the day, because it is a long day for some of the kids if they're there from the start to the end.
And as parents, it's about being role models to our kids as well. And like you say, if they see you out there doing things, they're more than willing to pitch in as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got heaps of kids who are always, happy to drag equipment around and do stuff for us. So it is about being that role model to them.
And I liked your idea there with the meet and greet. We might take that on board at Ringwood as well.
That's good.
We haven't done it, but we've workshopped, and we just thought, at least that's an opportunity, because people come and go, and on the days that you're doing the setup, you're all busy. You can't get people to sit in one area. So all of a sudden, if you can get them in and do a quick presentation about who the club is and everything like that, you got them captive, and hopefully that even if you get a 10, 20% uplift of assistance on the regular meet days, well, that's a win.
Yep.
Just getting back to the kids, that I had a funny incident last year that because we're at Lakeside, so I patrol the perimeter. I've got the microphone that gives me access to the speakers around the whole stadium, and someone walked up to me and to my daughter and said, "Oh, who's your dad?" And she said, "Oh, that's my dad there." What does he do? Well, he owns this stadium. And I thought,
I know.
that's funny.
Yeah.
I don't own the stadium per se, but I do have a little bit of responsibility on this. A couple of hours on a Sunday, so they love it because they see the microphone and things like that, and they want to be part of it. And you can't be all too serious. That you let them have a little bit of a word. You word them up to make sure they're not going to be rude or offensive or anything like that. But just little things about getting in the buggy to drive around where you've got all the equipment on the back and those type of things. They love it. They feel like they've got this special VIP pass, your kids, and they've got access to all areas. And they're in there.
We had a group that used to love singing "Happy Birthday" over the microphone, and sometimes it was hard to drag it away from them.
I've got a feeling we're going to have 100 centres next marketing campaign for committee members. Is going to be sign on. Your kids will love it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's not a bad angle. I mean, it's you're looking at different ways to get people involved, and maybe that's part of it. So.
Just briefly, you were mentioning there with parents being more time conscious. We are seeing with sports, parents want to sort of get in, get out. Have any of you had to change how you structure a committee position? I know some of, I think you were saying that there was potentially room to divide a role into multiple or cover it across multiple people. Have you found that over, say, your 6 years on the committee, that you've had to appoint more people to do a role that maybe was taken up by one?
I know we have split secretary at the moment. We've got a minutes secretary and then just our general secretary, just to sort of lighten the load a bit there. Because, I mean, the secretary role is probably one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest roles at a centre. So we've sort of divided that up. Previously, it's been one role. And I think going back to when I first started on the committee, it was actually two roles back then as well. So over time, things change. Other than that, though, no, I think, again, like I said, we had a fairly solid core group of committee members that were just managing to get everything done. I think it's only now that when we're trying to attract new people that we're sort of looking at how can we break it down a little bit more to perhaps make the effort on each person a little bit less. And like I said before, it might be, come on board, you can be the person that runs down to Baker's Delight every Saturday morning to get the rolls for the barbecue, so it could be just a simple task like that, and if you got everyone doing a small task like that, it makes it a lot easier.
So we'll move on to just some general discussion questions, so feel free to jump in at any stage. And Tony's actually mentioned this, but does your committee, we might go to you guys with Ringwood, do you have any of your own resources that you provide new committee members or have access to for committee members, or do you source these for external places? And a little bit of a promotion for our centre, .com.au as well, that I had a bit to do with in creating. Do you have any of these?
No. So as I said, we started a process last year of documenting position descriptions, and we've had them before. No one just could seem to find them when we were looking for them, unfortunately. So other than that, we did have a committee manual that had been updated up until a few years ago and then kind of got dropped. And I've gone and retrieved that, and I think we're going to try and update that to so that we can have that as a resource for people. And I know when the secretary came on board, or the secretaries, because obviously we've got two, as I said, they were looking for a resource, and one of them said, well, I used to be on a kinder committee and we got handed a folder and it had all the information in it, and it had a calendar of events, and it told us when we had to do various different things, like, affiliations, and when do we assign people to roles, and when do we set our calendar, and just things that the committee have to do each year. So we don't have a lot of it, but I think the current committee's starting to look at some of those things to be able to get some resources. And I know they've also they have gone and had a look at our centre and grabbed a few things there, because it's a bit of a learning curve for everyone. And Fresh Eyes has also identified a few things that we weren't aware of, that we weren't probably not paying attention to, but you just kind of did it because it was what you'd always done. And people come in and go, but why do you do that? And you start to go, oh, okay, well, we're not sure. And obviously without anything documented, it becomes difficult to say, well, this is why we started doing that 10 years ago. Is it still relevant or not? So definitely something we're looking to do, and I did start a bit of documentation myself, but yeah, it's something that we're lacking a bit.
So I remember I was actually, when I started my role here at Little Athletics Victoria, I was still on the committee of Kill Little Aths. And when I was asked as one of my projects to put together our centre resource guide, I went back through and we had a paper, a folder, I guess, back 10, 20 years ago that each centre used to be handed. Then it moved on to a CD, early 2000s, and then this sort of nothing was done from 2008, 9. So I was tasked with putting it all online, and you quickly realise it's nothing new to Little Athletics. What we're doing here in Little Athletics is pretty much identical to what other sports are doing, what kindergartens are doing, and it was extremely surprising for me how easy it was to find some of these resources. And I know from putting ours together, we went to AFL's got a community sort of web page that they do. I think we looked at Netball Victoria, Tennis Australia had resources, and they're all almost identical in terms of how they're structured, how they'll put up. But I think they can be quite a good resource for centres. And I know when I was on the committee, I didn't think to look for these things online, but in my staff position, when I was tasked to sort of look up and structure or take what we've had previously and put it into a new format, I couldn't believe how easy it was. And I remember going through and there was a website, I was just trying to look for it before, but a local state sporting website just had 30 role position descriptions, and they would fit our roles to a T, really. Maybe cut out a few dot points, add something more specific to Little Aths, and there you go. Do any of you use any external resources? Sorry, I know, Bryce, you've spoken, but Tony?
I have, because I got the job description sort of templates off your website as a starting point, and just for consistency. So that was fantastic. I haven't used anything externally myself off the top of my head, but yeah, I think it's just getting more of a structure around your operation. We'll evolve and we'll have different skill sets that we bring to the role, but I think that if you're going to step away, that you want to make it as easy as possible for the people that step into the roles, because the catch cry, no surprises. You don't really want to leave surprises, and you're not going to remember everything. It's just making sure that you sort of have a general understanding of what's involved, when it's involved. That time from the end of Little Athletics, of the track and field season to the start of the next one, it comes around pretty quickly, especially, I'm involved in cross country, and I don't do a lot of work in this season, but all of a sudden I'm realising it's the end of June. We haven't organised our schedule for next season. We don't have a track. There's a bit of work to do before the start of October.
Yeah, not having a track is a challenge. We were lucky. We managed to find a centre who runs their competition on a Sunday that we were able to use their track on a Saturday, but just the logistics of that is a challenge. So good luck to you on that one, I think.
Absolutely. But again, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel, as you mentioned, Lachlan. There's so many organisations out there that we can learn from and lean on to get resources and just customise it for the centre and whatnot. So that's something I'll be encouraging myself and the committee at Ringwood to do, is just to bring everything into the 21st century as well, because the path of least resistance is the best. If people are looking for something and they can't find it, they go too hard and then they just forget about it. So whether that's someone wanting to get their kids involved in Little Aths for the first time, if the website, which is where most people will go to, doesn't have the information that they're looking for, or it's not clear, they're just going to go, move somewhere else or take on another sport that's got it all set up.
So we've got a couple of questions for all three of you, and we'll just rotate around. So if you could provide an ideal experience to a new committee member, what would that look like? And we'll start with you, Michael. So if you could provide an ideal set up for yourself going into the role.
Come in and sit down, and someone else took care of the committee meeting that time. So I look, ideally...
Be careful because Bryce is right next to you.
That's right. Just having a welcoming, before the role was even official for me. So the process was very different because I'm not a parent. I wasn't a member. Like, things had to change. Nobody was prepared for someone from the outside coming in and taking on a committee role, let alone a president role. So I guess between Bryce, my brother, Janelle, and a couple of other committee members, they made it as comfortable for me to take on this role as possible, and it was path of least resistance. I didn't actually have to do anything except fill in the paperwork that was required, so everyone knew who I was. So yeah, it was as easy as that. And then again, making the role and what's involved, not just from a president's perspective, but from a committee member, it's easy. Like, make it as easy and as simple as possible, because everything else will come and go. Like, you can't fully understand what's going to happen in a day's time, let alone when the season starts. You just got to roll with it. And if you feel comfortable in that role beforehand, it just makes it easy on the day-to-day stuff.
And the people around you.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's just, I mean, that's the thing. Welcoming committee where you feel like you're supported. You can walk into any role. You know, obviously walking into president's a big challenge, but at the same time, you know, there's enough people around Michael that he'll be able to sort of take on the role, and once he starts to feel comfortable, he'll be able to put his own stamp on the role, similar to what I did over my years as president.
And Tony?
Yeah, I think it's the not putting restrictions on it, that if they can't commit fully to it, they don't have to be at every meeting, etc. It's a matter of being able to contribute and participate, and you know, it's setting it up and making sure that it's not scary. That you know, most of the committees around the state, everyone's passionate about what they do, and they're there for a reason, and that there's that enthusiasm. So it's ensuring that, you know, it's not onerous and that you've got to do it by this date, etc. That we always have things that fly on from month to month as far as tasks, because they're not done, because we've all got lives outside of little athletics. There's, you know, family, other sports, and our professional life as well. So I think, yeah, that when you're trying to get someone on the committee, it's painting a picture whereby you can contribute in some way, shape or form. And it's up to you how much you want to put in. If all of a sudden I felt that I was overstepping the mark and being quite restrictive or quite demanding of someone to be doing things, I think I would lose that person pretty quickly. And then that spot would be a vacancy, and then trying to find someone to recruit for it. And that's where I think I've probably learnt over the last 12 months, just because of the pressures, that you've got certain expectations of how you're going to do things, but you've got to understand that there's other people and they've got their own skills and strengths, and you need to let them go forth and conquer, give them some guidance on what you'd like to see, etc. But otherwise, if you're going to have your finger in every pie, you might as well do all the jobs yourselves. That if you want to vet the communications, or if you want to run this particular event, or be the team manager, or and all those type of things. So I think you just need to be able to step back at the same time.
Yeah. It's a fine line, obviously. I mentioned before that, you know, that one of our new secretaries was keen on, you know, do you have a folder that you hand me? And I think some people would be intimidated by being handed a folder, and it kind of creates this expectation that you read all the materials in it, and that you're across everything in that manual. So it's a fine line between sort of swamping someone when they first join and giving them that space to sort of learn on the job as well. So I think it's about having the resources there as required, but perhaps not pushing it too much that it makes it feel like, you know, oh, I've got to get across everything and I have to know everything. And you don't need to know everything. I mean, my own experience, I had no background in athletics whatsoever, and within, you know, 4 years, I was the president of our centre, despite never having stepped on an athletics track as you know, in my younger years. So it's about giving people that space to grow. But yes, you do need that support and that framework around to make life easy.
Definitely.
Now, it's time for our next segment, and this is thank you very much to our previous competition coordinator, manager. Michael Massini did mention this on Twitter after the last Inside Our Centre episode was released, and I'll give you a bit of time to think about this. We'll just explain it. So it's time for Innovate segment, a new segment on our podcast where the guests come up with something innovative that they can bring back to their centre. This doesn't necessarily have to be about today's topic, but it can incorporate it. They will get a bonus point. The idea also doesn't have to be achievable, but will be scored favourable if it is. Now, we're of course not scoring it. I'm going to start.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Getting your points for this.
Yeah. Trying to lighten up the
something.
podcast a little bit.
And I like it how this is the second episode, and that's a new thing.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of new at this
Oh,
point.
yeah.
Isn't it? But,
Kind of. We didn't do it on last month's. So I'm going to have one on a learning platform. So my idea, if speaking of new committee members, if I had unlimited resources and unlimited time to be able to do it, I would create a learning platform online where new committee members or current committee members could jump on and almost like a YouTube, go back and basically watch step-by-step instructions on how to do anything and everything related to a committee position and to Little Athletics related topics as well. So that's my innovative idea. Does anyone else have?
I mean, I like that, but yeah, it's having the resources and someone having the time to actually go and do that. I've personally,
Hey, it says it doesn't have to be.
I've worked in at a company where all the process docs were done by video. You just watched it and you got done, and it was just a very easy transition. You could watch it in your own time. It's much easier than reading a big manual. And yeah, I've got one. We were discussing this very quickly off air, and I'd like to see an events-based state competition that I experienced at Senior Aths many years ago. So you got individual state championships, but maybe seeing a centre or regional team-based championship. I mean, a lot of people in my youth transitioned out of athletics into team-based sports because of that sense of community that you get playing football or netball or whatever the case may be. So I wouldn't mind seeing if we could do that at Ringwood or Eastern Region.
It's not a bad idea. I like that because I know when we do things like region track and field, region relays, that's the closest you come to teams. And, you know, we just, the camaraderie and the kids all getting behind one another at those events is amazing. And definitely something if you could encourage a team-based. I know there's centres playing around with nitro ideas, you know, similar things there and team-based activities. We've had a go at it in the past. Never quite got it right, so would love to hear some more ideas to flesh that one out. Yeah,
because going back to high school days, and there was different houses. I mean, the amount of people that got involved in athletics, they didn't even like doing PE, let alone anything else. But it was just there was a lot of fun and there was a atmosphere about it. And I thought, well, if that can be done at an athletics track in a competition where there's a reward and there's an incentive, that might just encourage families to get involved a little bit more, but kids to continue in athletics because for whatever reason it has its ebbs and flows, and for a long period of time athletics was like a forgotten sport. It's starting to come back again for various reasons, and when I was doing it, I mean, it was probably a golden era with your Kathy Freemans and your Cole Vanderkuyps and these type of people that helped build the profile of the sport. And I think there's a great opportunity at the moment for that to happen again because there's different types of running in particular that are starting to take focus, and then social media obviously helps with the youth about getting involved and whatnot. So
I like that idea as well. But we just had some feedback yesterday for someone who had joined our club for cross country, and she's not winning races, but she's competing and having a go. And her mum just said she just loves running with the other girls, and because it was such a small meet yesterday, you could hear parents calling out go so and so, etc., and everything like that, and all the parents are involved. So it's that camaraderie of athletics where normally it's just you against the clock and against another person, but when all of a sudden you've got that team-based event, it's a lot more fun because you're cheering your fellow competitors to do better, to get points, for example, a bit like house sports, to try and win. That the winner of the competition is Blue House, and primary school, the kids just love it and they all get up and cheer, etc. So I sort of like that idea as well. But they could have some legs.
Great new ideas. Hopefully we can implement them in the near future.
Watch this space.
Our final segment on Inside Our Centre podcast is story time. We've asked our guests to bring to the table a story of a memorable moment during their time at Little Athletics. This can be from a specific moment or something that sticks out to them over a longer duration. They may have witnessed an athlete go on and be drafted to a national football, netball or basketball team, or they may have witnessed a moment of incredible sportsmanship that our audience should hear about. Does anyone have a story, something that they remember from Little Athletics that they would wish to share?
I'm going to throw it over to the other two because mine goes way back. It's a bygone era when I was an athlete. I don't think that's going to really captivate the audience.
Well, I had, last year for us, we've got 2 multi-class athletes at our club, and we had someone who joined for the first time last year, and his parents hadn't got him involved to be assessed as far as what category and everything, and notification came out from LAVic about it was the regional, and I gave him Sam's number, and he called, and the parents called up Sam, and they were able to get him involved and entered, and he was an under 15 athlete. We're out at regionals, and he competed in 4 events, and walked away with like 3 gold and 1 silver, I think it was, and the parents that were there for their athletes were so proud and so pleased that this particular person could participate. But his mum was so pleased and see the joy on the family's face, but also see the gentleman come back to the tent and all the other athletes are cheering him and high-fiving him. That was pretty special, just to see someone who was new to athletics and had only been at the club for less than 1 season and had gone out there and was able to compete just as like, the regular athletes out there and get success, etc. That was pretty special, I think, for myself, but also for the club, that everyone spoke about how fantastic it was to see him get involved because he has some ability, and hopefully that his parents, do get him classified properly and he gets to compete in other events this year and take it further because he's got some ability. So that was that was pretty special and something that stuck in my mind for last season.
I guess for me, there's one event on our calendar every year that I most look forward to, and that's our the LAC gift, or the Ringwood LAC gift, which is effectively a handicap event where I go through and grab everyone's 100-metre times for the year, and we break them up into, give them the handicap of whatever their time is. So our fastest kid, obviously off scratch. We do boys and girls separately, but I love the event, and I've even volunteered to keep coming back to run this event each year, despite me sort of walking away from athletics a little bit. But the event's just amazing. We have these races where you've got an entire field of kids where anybody can win that race, and it actually inspires some of the kids who probably aren't usually winning races. Sometimes I have to re-handicap them during the day because they all of a sudden find a burst of speed. But that event, when they think they can win a race, they certainly find a little bit of extra speed in there, and I'm quite often pushing the kids back a couple of metres when they come up to semi-finals and finals. But the event in itself gives every athlete at that centre the opportunity to be our champion. And in the time that we've been running it, it's probably about 6 years or so now, I don't think we've ever had our faster athletes win it. I think by virtue of the handicapping system, they're actually at a little bit of a disadvantage. And also for the older kids, we make them run out of spikes. So that's probably something that they have to get used to as well. But, in our time, we've had kids who probably finish last in every race who've won the gift. And even better, 2 years ago, keeping up with the multi-class theme that we had going before from Tony, one of our multi-class athletes actually won our girls' gift 2 years ago. And that was for me just a moment of pride. That event gave every opportunity, and to see these kids walking, we give them a little sash, like a stall gift sash, and we give them that sash and they walk around, and one mum commented last year, she goes, my son's still walking around on top of the world with this sash on. It's Sunday afternoon, it's been a day since we competed, but he's still walking around with his sash on.
That's awesome.
that event and those days are something that I will remember and cherish from my time at Little Aths. It's just such an amazing thing that we do.
Well, that's all we have time for on episode 2 of Inside Our Centre. We hope you enjoyed what you've heard. Thanks to our guests, Tony Stubbs, Bryce Sandow, and Michael Smith on their insights throughout the podcast. Next month, we'll delve into all things centre planning, so be sure to subscribe now on your favourite podcast app and make sure you don't miss out